Hi, this is Lorne Epstein here at the Lorne Epstein Show on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Welcome back for another episode, and today we are broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada, the hotbed of desert, money, and all sorts of things unspoken. Today we're going to be talking to a very special guest, Yvette Cameron. But before we do, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about the conversation around blockchain. So you've probably heard about blockchain, and I'm sure a lot of you know what it is. We're going to be talking about blockchain and the workplace. I'm taking a quote from what Yvette had written here. Was Einstein said, whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters, which I think is just great wisdom. And to kind of expand on that, today's digital data is constantly exchanged in supposedly secure and trusted environments. Yet we know from history, no system is perfectly secure. Human resources, all sorts of places have seen corrupted data, altered records, falsified credentials, and blockchain has emerged as a proven strategy against data corruption and in restoring trust, we hope. This conversation is we're going to talk about some organizations perhaps that are kind of applying blockchain to the human resource process, from very small uses to those with broader enterprise impacts. So today I have Yvette Cameron. Yvette joins us to talk about what Einstein said, and she has over 25 years in the human capital industry. She is the founder of NextGen Insights, where she gives visionary insights on how technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things, collaboration, 3D printing, and smart workplaces will both influence and collide with changing norms in the future of work. Welcome to the show, Yvette.
Thank you very much, Lorne. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and you came from Colorado.
I did, where apparently we had a massive hailstorm today. So
really? So you missed
welcome
it.
to May.
That's great. Awesome. We're in California. We're in Colorado.
Near Denver.
Near Denver. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, it is.
So what brought you to the conference, the Unleash conference?
Well, I was invited to speak on this topic of blockchain, and it's a topic I'm very passionate about in the work that I've been doing, especially in the last 5 years, but really for the length of my career in HR. I've been focused on innovative technologies, what's happening, what's coming next, and how do we make practical use and transformational use of that technology. And blockchain is an area that I think has huge transformational opportunities in the HR environment, and yet it's one that the HR department is not really paying much attention to. They've embraced other technologies over time, and I think that embracing of new technologies is accelerating, but I'm not seeing it in blockchain. So given the opportunity to come and speak about why should we care, what is the opportunity, I couldn't miss it. Right. And it's Las Vegas, so come on.
Awesome. Yeah, so Yvette is one of the speakers at the conference this week. So let's talk about blockchain first. Mm-hmm. So give me your understanding of blockchain.
Yeah. To avoid, I think, a lot of technical, I think the easiest way to describe blockchain is to envision a distributed or a shared database that is, shared amongst many individuals, where data is stored in an immutable format, meaning once it's there, you can't change it. You can add to it. You can add additional information, but the information is secure, trusted, and unchangeable. And that shared environment is part of the trust factor. It eliminates the need, I think, for centralized owners, essentially the HCM repositories that we're using today.
Yeah, HCM standing for? Human
Capital Management. And really puts the power back into the hands of people.
So a lot of folks listening, they're not HR folks, but I think that this would apply to them for sure. So let's talk a little bit more about blockchain. So from what I understand is that blockchain is software where I have a transaction. I put something into this software, and there's like 50 people in my little network. Mm-hmm. They all see that.
Right.
They have access to what I did. And then someone else comes in, you come in, you're in my network, and you make additions to that data. Everyone sees that, right? So now let's say the third person, like Andy, my producer, comes in, and she goes in and tries to delete or change that data. Well, then the system would kind of reconcile because it sees, well, no, either you can't do it, or does it compare it against the first two? Like, that's the thing I'm not quite sure of. Is like, how does, if somebody wants to tamper it, how does it reconcile?
Yeah, that's, I think, the beauty of blockchain is that amongst the systems or the records that it's shared with, whether it's systems, servers, et cetera, it's a permanent record. And so if Andy were to come in and try to modify data, first off, it's encrypted and hard to access, so modification is very, very difficult. But were she able to do that, the other systems, you said originally 50 people in your system, are all having to validate that that's an accurate change. And if they see that that data that Andy brought in is not accurate, she's trying to modify data, it will reject it. So her component is she's unable to make the change. Same thing on deleting, right? You cannot delete data in the blockchain. So if you said that, you were hired in January 1st and you said, oh no, I need to change it to January 15th, in the blockchain you'd have to append a record and say, here's a new piece of data, as opposed to going in and changing or eliminating that information altogether.
Right. So my birth date was in the system, let's say.
Yeah.
And I don't want my birthday to change, right? Because birthday doesn't change. And all 50 of us know, by the way, May 19th is my birthday. Andy can't come in and change it.
No,
she just can't.
She can't.
But now when you said, let's talk about the can't, because this is where people will go like, well, you can hack a system, right? Let's talk about that, because I'm so intrigued by the technology. What's the hackability level, or how do we say this isn't really hackable?
Yeah. So in blockchain, every record has encryption capability. There's very complex keys that allow access, and the owners of that data control the access to that information.
So these like 128-bit. What are these? How do we say they're no? What is it?
Gosh, that's a good question. Out
of your pay grade, we'll figure it out. It's okay. I mean,
yeah, I'm not going to be able to get into that level of technical detail,
fine.
but I will say that the beauty of this blockchain is that it is unhackable, right? And with the constant monitoring and validation amongst everybody in the chain, it means that trying to put in data that the others can't validate makes it impossible to make that change.
Right.
So
what if we started with invalid data? What if when we set up these 50 users, instead of my birthday being May 19th, it was set as September 19th?
Yeah. That's one of the core challenges. So blockchain is pretty early in its technology. I mean, it's been around since 2009. It started as a way to support Bitcoin. But really the applications and the maturity is still very, very new. And one of the core challenges is, how do you ensure that the data going in can be trusted? And that's where the systems and the handshaking between the systems is really important. If I'm putting in data, the receiving system has to be able to validate it. And there has to be mechanisms for that. Is it a government record? Is it a document? Is it, the physical presence? And those trust handshakes are still being debated and developed. We have open source standards that are emerging for those levels of trusted data. How do you know that the data going in is trusted? But there's still areas where there is concern about the data going in.
And when we say open source, what do we mean?
Non-proprietary software and code
that
anybody can get access to. And by developing more and more blockchain applications or leveraging some of these open source quote-unquote standards that are starting to emerge, so that we're all speaking the same language, we're all expecting the same protocols, and to drive the consortium of users to be a much bigger network so that the data indeed can be trusted. One of the common applications here is, for example, education and validating degrees or courses that are taken. And generally, if an employer is doing a background check on somebody's education, you're going to trust when you call the education facility and they say, yes, Jane Doe did complete this course and did complete this degree. If there's an error in that education system, in their system as a whole, right, and then they've got the completion of the degree showing as incomplete, whereas the individual actually did complete it, that's a core problem. And honestly, these things still have to be worked through. But that's, once the data is in there and it is validated, you have to trust some source record to start with. Then again, that from then on that degree validation will be trusted and can be leveraged by anybody who's accessing the chain.
So I'm gonna. I guess I can kind of speak out of school because, the person I'm going to talk about is no longer living, but my mom, lovely lady, she never told me her right birth date. I knew what her birth date was, but I didn't know what her year was. And for as long as I knew her, I did not know how old she was exactly. I could guess, if I had to guess, but it became such a thing that she was so vain about it that I just stopped even thinking about it. And then, within a year after my mom's passing, I'm like, I told my wife, I had no idea how old my mom was. She says, I know, 75. And I'm like, what? How did you know that? And she's like, well, I looked on one of the records. Right, so she had validated it. But what was interesting, what my mom did, was that she, and I can say this because she's passed, but she had lied about her birth date with different financial institutions. And it actually changed her disbursement of her 401k.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right, crazy, right? But she hacked the system, and I don't, if she felt that was the benefit to her. But no one validated.
Yeah.
No, clearly they didn't validate her birth date.
Yeah. So, and again, when you think about blockchain, it's a digital representation of all these documents that we've been keeping, right, for our own personal identification. So we've got driver's licenses that are given to us from our states we can drive, and we have to prove, our birth, our date of birth and other things. And so we bring in a birth certificate, a document stamped by a hospital that easily could have been modified.
Sure.
And if blockchain is based on, for example, the DMV records of a state, some of which may have some faulty basis for their information, that will perpetuate it. So I don't have all the answers.
But these are questions.
But these are real valid questions. How do we ensure that the data itself is accurate? Now, in a financial institution and how they're using blockchain to really the benefit here is to obviate the middleman, right? So to allow people to pass money to each other without going through banking institutions and other things. We're seeing blockchain used in land transfer records. So rather than having the banks involved in title tracking and whatnot, and this is happening in Sweden, I believe, that they're using blockchain to validate that land has been transferred. And, the person selling the land indicates that the person buying it. Others are validating, people are validating and systems.
So a whole bunch of people know who
yes,
owns
they
the
know.
land in the database,
And then you don't need in the future banks to validate the title trust because you've got validation of these things through the transactions as they happen. That's
an interesting point right there. That what you said right there is that we don't need this system because this other system, blockchain, will now be more trustworthy.
Yeah.
Well, will it be more trustworthy? And I guess let's talk about some of the reasons why, right? So it could be more trustworthy. Clearly, it's more frictionless.
Exactly.
Right? So for the listeners, any kind of transactions you have, this will make them smoother, faster, quicker?
Well, that's the promise of blockchain.
Or is it okay if I have to wait? Like if I go buy a house, I got to wait a month. It takes a while.
Yeah, I think it's certainly in some situations the immediacy of blockchain isn't the main business driver, but in other cases it absolutely is. If you're using blockchain in the case of medical validation, is this person allergic to this thing? Is this person authorized for this treatment? It could be I've got an urgent business, opportunity. I need to have somebody on this in a week. Can I wait that long for background checks, et cetera? So there's different levels of immediacy, but the goal of blockchain is absolutely to reduce the friction. If again, I've got a great candidate I want to bring on board and they're being courted by others, and I have to make a decision, do I offer them or not? Again, this background can be done immediately press a button, I get instant validation of their credentials, their experience, etc., as opposed to waiting 1 to 3 days for the background check vendors to bring that information forward. In the meantime, maybe I've lost that candidate. One example, but you can imagine in finance, insurance, health, etc., there's many different levels of immediacy that might be required.
So for those who are listening, because we're talking with an expert around HR,
Right.
And I think everyone's kind of wondering, like, well, blockchain, like I don't get Bitcoin or I don't understand blockchain. But I think it's fair to say that the internet has super frictionless the world, right? Super hyper. It's like so much more. I mean, like I remember, I'm sure maybe you remember, Andy, when you would send away for something mail order and it took, a month or 2 months to come. And it was no big deal. Like there was no sense of urgency that I needed to get that little decoder ring from the back of the comic book. And now people are upset if Amazon doesn't ship within 2 days.
The level of expectation is completely transformed from yesterday. Immediacy is much more important to people now. The internet has totally made it, if I'm looking for information, I want it now. If I'm looking for solutions, action, I want it now as opposed to tomorrow or a week from now.
Yeah.
So even in these transactions, and you were asking about, so what if I have to wait 2 weeks for the title transfer to come through? That's not how business is done in today's economy.
It is. It's not how people...
but it's not driving satisfied customers. And ultimately,
or revenue.
Yeah, or revenue.
I mean, I think revenue is what the bottom line is. If we can make more money, then that's what we're going to do. Doing the exact same thing, because this isn't like a new business model, right? This isn't like, we're going to do things totally different. It's just taking what's already existing.
Well, it is a new business. It is a new business model, though. I mean, again, if banks are not part of the
more than the time.
Yeah, so if banks are not part of the transaction, how do they not be completely obviated in the future, transactions of, home exchanges and whatnot? How do they gain access to this information? How do they gain access to the transaction so that they can have a cost to it? And so I think blockchain is not just about a technology that's removing friction and giving more trust. It's also kind of a point at which companies have to ask, are we still relevant in the era of blockchain? And how do we ensure that we are still players, or how do we have to change our services, or how do we have to change our protocols so that we're not cut out from the deals and the transactions, or that we're supporting this new way of doing business? There's.
So you think it's radical change?
I do, and I think about when I think, as you said, I'm an expert in HR. I've been in the field for more than 25 years. And we all have the stories of the HR people, doing their background checks and entering data into payroll and performance reviews. Well, now performance reviews and things like that are done through self-service. But ultimately, with the advent of blockchain, we're going to see a change in those functions. HR won't have to have experts on staff to do background checks. A lot of those back office functions will be mitigated or completely eliminated, while the blockchain technology is taking care of that hand-to-hand trust confirmation, freeing up HR to do other things. It's just another of those efficiency opportunities for HR. Yeah. So I think that if HR isn't careful, they have a brand and a reputation that may get out of their control if blockchain applications take off and they're not part of them.
Let's talk about HR in a minute, but we're going to take a quick break. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting. You're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We'll be back in just a second. Hi, I'm Lorne Epstein, and you're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show, where we talk about jobs, careers, and the workplace, here on 96.7 FM. If you're interested in being on the show, you can give me a call at 240-876-0276 or email me at Lorne, Lorne, at electriccow.com. You can check out our Facebook page, which is Lorne Epstein, and also our Mixcloud account. So if you go to mixcloud.com, Lorne Epstein, you'll find our shows. Thanks so much. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, here on The Lorne Epstein Show, here on 96.7 FM in Arlington, Virginia. With me today is Yvette Cameron, and Yvette is talking to me about blockchain and its implication for HR. And I ask as the listener to really kind of expand your thinking, because while Yvette is an expert in HR, a lot of these things she's saying are very relevant for the work that you're doing. And I think we all kind of, and I think what I'm trying to get to for myself is to see, like, how is this relevant to me? So talk to me how blockchain is relevant to human resources and what the values. Because one of my concerns, and I'm not picking a fight about it, but one of my concerns is that everything that everyone knows is now in a computer. Mm-hmm. There's no more paper records, and it can get hacked, it can get destroyed, it can get deleted. Like, you can literally be deleted, and all of the horrible movies I've seen about the future and technology come true.
Yeah. Well,
and Skynet is taken over.
Well, frankly, you can say Skynet's a fabrication, or you can say it's a possibility. I want to look at a future where we're
just so you know, listeners,
that. Her
face looks more optimistic about Skynet being a real possibility. I just want you to know that. You can't see that, but I can tell you.
So you're right. There's our systems today are all about centralized accumulation of data. And we've seen a huge number of hacks in the last few years. In fact, I was looking at a stat recently that showed, prior to 2000, well, I guess in 2002, maybe there were less than 200 reported hacks in the U.S. of this public data. And in 2016, well over 800. And that's just through 2016. That's not even the last, the big Equifax in 2017 and beyond. I mean, so this idea of data all being centralized and managed by some, series of secure systems, it's not working. Mm-hmm. And that is the whole premise here and the excitement around blockchain in the future. The data is no longer held in one central system. It's held and replicated in many, many systems, so that any change, any addition has to be validated and confirmed, that no one individual has access to all of that information, that each piece of information or each block in the chain of information is controlled through encryption and access keys. And again, it's replicated on many, many systems.
Right.
So
yeah, that does make it sound very appealing, right? The fact that it's not in one database, it's in lots of databases, and so it really can't get hacked per se, because it's not there, it's everywhere.
It's distributed, exactly. Yeah. But this idea that all of your data, then all of your HR data, is in a public system isn't necessarily the case, right? Because blockchain can be a public blockchain or a private blockchain. And there's also questions about, well, what about the privacy considerations that certain countries have and so forth? Is my data now in some public or private blockchain that can be accessed by others with or without my knowledge?
That's a good point. So for those of you who don't know, there's something called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Rights, mm-hmm. which the EU is putting into place May 24th this mm-hmm. year, 2018. And what it says basically is that if you are an EU citizen, you own your data. So if you put your data into my computer system to sign up for something or apply to my company, I can't keep that data. I actually have to give you the opportunity to delete it. I have to constantly give you the opportunity to opt in for me to communicate with you. I mean, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, now how does that mesh with blockchain?
Yeah. So
I don't want to skip over too many things. Let's get to that.
But that's exactly one of the considerations. So we are seeing the rise of more blockchain applications where this data is distributed, and by its nature, data is not able to be eliminated. Right? Once it's there forever. And so you have a regulation like GDPR, which says I have the right to be forgotten. And so I want to tell my employer, hey, forget this information. It's one thing to remove fields in an HR database, for example, but it's impossible to remove that data from the blockchain. So does that mean that blockchain is inconsistent with GDPR in the future and can never be used in Europe? No, I don't think so. But I know it's being worked on, and there's different alternatives. One is this idea that those encryption keys, right, that give you the access to that data, perhaps those encryption keys become, you issue a guidance that basically says, mess up this encryption key. The encryption key is no longer valid. And so while the data is there, it's completely inaccessible because that key no longer works for that block of information.
And so no one else can see it.
And so nobody else
still
can see
there.
it. It's still there. Now, technically, we have to go under the GDPR and see what does it mean to erase data, right? Is it okay that it's there and simply not available to anybody in any way?
And everyone knows about erasing hard drives now. It doesn't really happen.
Yeah. So that's and you can't. Could you erase that information from 50 or 500,000 systems? Yeah. So there are absolutely things to work through, but people smarter than me in this technology are looking at alternatives. But I guarantee that this is, again, it's in its infancy, really. It's just, 9 years old or so. But as we see more challenges and more test cases coming forward, we'll see greater adoption of this technology that will comply with GDPR and these other data privacy issues.
So now tell me, let's talk about some of the applications of blockchain so that people can get context.
Yeah. So we're already seeing blockchain used very much in the recruiting space, most commonly to confirm background of individuals. So the blockchain-enabled CV, curriculum vitae, the blockchain-enabled background check, where companies who typically provide that data through computer searches and people calling.
Okay, so wait, let's talk about the blockchain resume.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I have a blockchain resume, I may have 50 different resumes.
Mm-hmm. How does that work?
Yeah.
So in a blockchain-enabled resume, you would identify your various sources of employment. Those employers would validate it through the blockchain protocol, and that then would become your blockchain certified or blockchain trusted.
So it's not like really the content of my resume. It's really more the dates, my employment record.
Well, that for now, that's where we stand. And there are some startups, I've seen them here at these Unleash conferences before, who are doing just that. They are encouraging people to put their CVs on this, to have it made validated by their various employers. It now becomes a trusted document, immutable. And as more employment is added, again, that's validated. And then think about that. That is a certified history, not like LinkedIn where it may or may not be accurate or the endorsements of others may or may not be accurate, but it's a certified instance of my experience. Now, over time, those can include skills, projects, capabilities, perhaps behaviors. So as that profile grows, it becomes a much richer digital identity for me and who I am. And as we move into the gig economy, that becomes very powerful. Right, you think about all the freelancers and the various systems we have, and really all you have is that information on the screen saying, oh, this is my experience. But if it's certified, it absolutely streamlines the process. And if you're using artificial intelligence to do things like matching people and their backgrounds to your project, how great to know that you're doing it on a validated resume as opposed to one that you hope is trusted, but you're not sure until you go through the background check. Talk about removing friction. Suddenly AI against a trusted source is huge.
Yeah, well, this definitely opens up a lot of questions we should ask about blockchain and about technology and how we want our lives to interact with the machines. I feel like we kind of got a lot shared. Is there anything else you want to say about this?
Well, I guess I would, So blockchain and HR, recruiting is a huge space for it. In the future, I think we're going to see more payroll applications. Again, there are some startups, but I know even some of the big guys are looking at.
And how would it work in payroll?
Essentially to manage the actual payroll. It could be through cryptocurrency, managing changes in taxation. Cross-border payments are very complex today with all the different taxing authorities and various pieces. Blockchain can totally mitigate a lot of those middle components.
I definitely don't want to get paid in cryptocurrency.
Well, that's an option, and there are some players who are doing that. But I think just general access to systems, the way
it's kind of crazy to me
performance.
that Bitcoin is, the value of a coin has just gone up for no reason.
Yeah. Well, think about it, though. I mean, recently in this Uber lawsuit, I think the woman who was in the last year who was making a suit was saying that her performance reviews had been changed by Uber. And if they had been managed in a blockchain environment, that would be impossible, right? It wouldn't. She could see the trusted, validated sources of her performance review and the ratings and various things. And if the company had gone in to try to make changes, it would be obvious. Right. But I think, in HR, if you think about anything that we're doing in HR, any data, contracts, backgrounds, all of that is totally impacted by this. But ultimately, long term, it's the biggest impact is on the individual. Because just as with GDPR saying that you own your individual data, that's what blockchain is going to enable. And suddenly, if I have access to my digital identity, all of my transactions, my work history, perhaps even consumer history and various things are available to me in a trusted environment, and I have the keys that control your access to that information. I decide what you see, what she sees, when you see, and to what degree. Suddenly, this is a personal identity situation as opposed to just information in my HR database. Long-term, blockchain is huge for HR, but bigger for the individual. And HR systems in general are going to have to think about how do they interoperate, not just with their data, but with these blockchain systems to access that information in the right ways at the right time. One final example, think about the driver's license, right? We are showing so much information on that driver's license. There's been a lot of talk about, is that the right level of information or not? But think about it. If somebody says, "Are you over 21?" You show them your driver's license. You say yes, and you're showing them your year of birth. What if in the future we were able to just have a digital certificate from some governing agency that says, "Yes, Lorne's over 21. I don't want to see your date of birth. I don't want to see the year that you were born. But shouldn't it be enough to say I'm over 21? Why do I have to show all of this detail?"
Sure.
So as an individual, I'm really
Sure,
excited
and my
about
driver's license number.
Well, there you go. Exactly.
Right.
I'm
And
very
my address.
excited. I'm very excited about where this is going, not just for HR, but as an individual,
Yeah.
because suddenly I truly will have access and control over what I'm showing to who and when and how much.
Well, it's exciting. I'm so glad you came and shared this with us. I feel actually a little more optimistic about the outlook after the conversation. Thank you so much. How can folks get in touch with you if they want to?
They can reach me at y@nextgeninsights.net. I'm available to answer questions and talk about this and other topics at length. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for being a guest on our show. And thanks to my new producer, Andy Kale. For our listeners who don't know, Andy Kale just joined us a couple of weeks ago. She's our new producer, and she'll be with us hopefully for quite a while. Welcome.
So, thank you. Happy to be here. It's exciting.
And that's another episode of the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We'll see you next week.